Yeah, hey, there we go. Good morning, friends. Welcome to another episode of Hope for a Better Life. I'm Ethan McCardle, coming to you live from Tucson, Arizona, Sunrise Chapel, and I get to do a distance thing with my dear friend, Dave Roth, who is in Boulder, Colorado, the new Church of Boulder Valley. So, good morning, Dave. How you doing, brother?
Morning, Nathan. Doing pretty fine, thank you. It's a beautiful day. Happy to be back with you again, my friends. So let's let it rip.
Sweet. Well, I'm very excited that we get to continue this journey we're on through the Bible, which brings us to the 12th chapter today of the book of Genesis. And rather uncharacteristically, I thought I'd start us by actually reading some of the text and then talking a little bit about how it strikes us this morning. Here we go, Genesis 12, starting in the first verse. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Get out of your country and from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And I shall make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him. Maybe we'll just start there.
It's beautiful. Thanks
Yeah.
for reading that. I love that it's an invitation, which sort of sounds like a command, obviously, because the Lord is saying, "Hey, Abram, get out of your country." But I think it's an invitation the Lord's issuing to all of us, where he's sort of saying that, all right, now we've got through those initial stories that lay the groundwork for the history of God's church on earth and its connection to God and how it's gone up and down and so forth, and the mistakes that were made, and turning away from love and charity and focusing on faith alone and so forth, that it's like a new beginning with Abram. But it's also calling to each one of us, all right, it's time to get up and move along. I want to bless you. I want you to have so many things that I offer you: happiness, joy, peace, contentment, the joy of being useful. But we got some work to do. So got to get up off your haunches and move along. So what do you reckon about it?
I really like that. One of the things I'm fond of saying is you start where you stand, and that's where the Lord starts with us. And so something in the way that you said that connected some dots for me I'm not sure I've ever done before between these two texts, the last one being Tower of Babel. And they, if I'm not mistaken, I think we started that riff with From the East. So they had departed from love to the Lord being the most central thing. And now the first thing said is get out of your country. So think your context. That's what I like to think. Your native land, there's a culture and a context. And maybe I go here in my mind because we, before moving here, lived in England for 5 years. I think all of us were under the delusion that, oh, it's kind of America Junior. So we'll close our eyes and we'll picture life almost exactly like it is here. I remember saying to the kids, we're going to the land of Harry Potter, and everybody getting excited about that. So we knew there were going to be some things that were unique about it, but they spoke English, right? We watched some movies. We got the vibe. Well, then you move over there and you're in Europe, baby. And it's a very different experience with a very different cultural context and set of expectations and way of speaking. All the different colloquialisms they use that we had no idea what they were saying for about the first year. What do they say? Two countries separated by a common language. And I think in that first year, as we were adjusting to just how different it was, there was a certain grieving what we had left behind to come here and a missing of our native experience. But the more we, sort of came to rest where we were and started finding things to appreciate and delight in, that was actually an exercise we did. What's one new, interesting, and different thing about life in the UK today? So we would try to do that each day for a while after being a little kerfuffled and grief-stricken about moving. And as we started doing that, we just found the experience of living somewhere new and learning about their way of being to be delightful instead of presuming that we knew what it was or what it even should be according to our expectations, opening ourselves to sort of being led through the experience instead of kind of resisting it based on what we believed about the way things are from our American experience, allowed our hearts and minds to open to sort of the delights of a new land and place. It was kind of a long intro, but I see a parallel to it here. Yeah. That we're being called out of this native way of thinking and believing life is. We have a mindset that centers our life on, it's all about me and what I'm getting out of things and the position it's putting me in terms of my status and my social standing and my ability to feel important and be important the way I conceive of myself to be. That's where a lot of my value is. And the Lord is actually saying, I think in the opening here, that's actually a mindset that you're going to need to leave behind if you're going to, and you'll grieve it and it'll be hard, but remember, this is the beginning of the journey to the land of Canaan, a symbol for heaven, a land that the Lord alone can show us. And in order to start on that journey, we have to be willing to say, okay, I'm headed to a new land, and I'm going to try to be led through that experience instead of presume to know what's best or what it should look like, or even that I'm the most central character in this journey. I'm going to try to give a lot of that up so that I can have new experiences, and trust that maybe the Lord's holding out something for me that's even better than what I've experienced, even though right now this feels like everything that's important to me. So anyway.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I like the parallel that you created there. And there's a lot there to say because, we can get thrilled about, oh yeah, the Lord's calling us on a journey to the promised land, the land that flows with milk and honey. And we have the privilege sitting here looking at the whole narrative of the Bible to go, well, this is how the journey went. And we know that things weren't peachy all the time and that there was a lot of difficulties and they were, went down into Egypt, became enslaved, and all this stuff that finally led them to the promised land. Like, this doesn't happen overnight, but that's the whole Bible is about our spiritual journey. So we can look at it now and go, oh, well, yeah, it turns out all right for Abram, but he doesn't know anything about it. He's like, I'm going to call you, get out of your country from everything that you know, your family, your father's house, to a land I will show you. You've never been there. You have no idea. You have no idea what this is, but you're for some reason trusting that what the Lord is promising is going to be worth the effort and the journey. And that's kind of the journey of our faith, right? We don't know what it's going to be like. But the Lord's saying, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless your family. You will become a blessing. And so what is it about us that hears that message and goes, oh, okay, I'll leave everything I know and go to this strange place that you're telling me about, which never been, but is it because where we are doesn't feel like it's working, or is it because we believe in this land of make-believe, so to speak, that the Lord has laid out before us? Is it because people have said, hey, come on this journey, it's great, you should do it? I don't think it's any of those things. The Lord says, and it's interesting in this work, Secrets of Heaven, he says that the old self has to die before the new self can be conceived. And so, there's this new birth that has to happen, that will happen, but there's part of us that's going to go through this painful death or change of character in order to get there. And so, yeah, be prepared for a lot of change, but also the promise is that it will be better. And anyone that's actually made efforts in one way or another to improve their health or improve their mental well-being or their spiritual life knows that it's a journey and it takes time and it takes persistence. And in time, you will experience the fruits of your efforts, but it's not a quick journey.
That was really beautiful. And it reminds me of where the text goes immediately thereafter, which you made reference to as, and from your kindred or from your father's house. And this is a long conversation for another time, but I think we'd be remiss not to drop it in here. We have this beautiful teaching about inherited inclination, or as I like to reference it, ancestral inclination. And the idea is that all of us have things we're carrying, and we're carrying things as a result of generations that have come before and their associated choices and crossroads they reached and ways that they responded to those crossroads. And we're not carrying those things as definitive or determinative, but we're carrying those things as impulses. And we don't really have to think too hard if we're at all inquisitive about our inner life to go, yeah, I got some impulses in there.
Right.
And I've noticed them rising up when it gets rough. Sorry, what'd you say?
Sorry, things that draw us and things that don't. I mean, one of the terms used is inclinations. Like I might be inclined to take stuff that doesn't belong to me, but I'm not inclined to murder anyone. I mean, we might be inclined to impatience or anger or frustration. So you can see those things, and you can see them show up in family patterns too. If you have honest conversations with siblings or parents or whatever, or children, and go, you ever struggle with this particular issue? Like, yeah, I do. Sorry, go on.
No, not at all. I love it. And so this, you're being called away, first of all, from your native way of thinking about life and conceiving of your place in it, country. And what has fed that on the negative side in so many ways has been these compounded inclinations. Confounded, compounded inclinations. And, what it's really describing is ego work, that you get to a place where you awaken to the nature of ego's impact on your life. And as you're awakening, a choice is before you. And of course, the Lord, we get to a place where we start to come into an awareness of these things, and we sort of think it's just happened when we arrive at these insights. But actually, the pressure's been building for a while. We've been led to a place where we come to realize our life is about more than we thought it was. And then that developing awareness sort of collides with either an intentionally chosen spiritual response or escapism. And that's the other part of this story that comes up for me is I've got some restlessness in me as a personality. And so I have had a tendency over my life, when I'm honest about it, to sort of go, this is getting a little rough. Hey, look over there.
Mm-hmm. Squirrel.
That looks, well, in my case too, maybe a change in my circumstances or my environment or, my literal place and area. That sounds like a lark. Let's try that. And if you haven't done the work to address the reason the Lord's calling you to the next stage in development, turns out those things follow you, and you still need to work them out and work them through. And I like thinking about that. And it happens to us a lot in our life. You're going to grow up and you're going to change schools, and you're going to move from family of origin often in the course of growing up to chosen friendships and sort of chosen family, and you're going to change jobs, and sometimes, maybe you've grown up in a faith tradition or with spiritual ideas that are important to you, and they've been a foundation to you, but you're on a journey to figure out what you believe for yourself. And there may be a time where you sort of feel like you're leaving that and discerning for yourself what it is you think and believe. So I think we do have that leaving impulse, and it's not just a natural impulse. There's something inherently spiritual to it. But I think the key is, and this came up a couple of years ago when I was facing a job transition, it was my dad that said it to me. He said, don't just leave, whatever happens here, don't just leave, go somewhere. I feel that and hear that in this narrative, like the Lord is calling us to a place that only He can show us, but we need to leap off of the foundation that's been laid so that we can go somewhere, not just to get out of things that are hard or difficult.
Yeah. Thank you. It's interesting to think about Abram, and we don't really know anything about him, right? We don't know if this was, he's a problem child, or, I mean, he's old enough that he has a nephew, so I think he's old enough, but an older person, but, we don't know that he's not clamoring for a change, or what is this all about? And it doesn't really matter, because it's that's not the point. But I think the Lord is calling. So if we think of ourselves as Abram in the story, and I think that's a good thing to do when you read the Bible, is to think of yourself as all these characters as parts of us that are being led or taught or instructed or guided by the Lord in some way. So what is that part of me that's symbolized by Abram that is being asked or called by the Lord to make a change, to do something different? I think of a 12-step program and people acknowledge that that my life has become unmanageable in this certain way. And so I think that's often the incentive for us to be willing to listen to that voice of change, is because something isn't working. I'm struggling in my marriage, I'm struggling in my personal life, I'm struggling with my job or an addiction, or I have anxiety and worry and fear and all these things. So what is it that I can do? And the Lord's calling us out towards something if we're willing to listen. And I can't help but think about the very beginning of Genesis, where the Spirit of God is hovering over the face of the waters, that where the Lord is waiting and watching for that moment where he can say, let there be light. And I think he's doing the same thing here. He's waiting, watching, and looking for that opportunity where he can say, Abram, time to leave your country. And it's interesting, too, that you talked about the inclinations, the hereditary tendencies. There's different words that are used to express those. But I like to say that, Jesus said, your enemies will be those of your own household.
Right.
And we tend to look outside of ourselves and say, well, this person's the problem, or the government's the problem, or my job's the problem, or whatever, instead of the Lord saying, hey, look inside of yourself. Your enemies are those things inside of you that are causing you pain and suffering, comparison, as we mentioned earlier, or fear, worry, regret, comparativism, if that's a word.
Yeah.
All these things are the things that we can think of as the hooks that the hells can use to try to keep us stuck somewhere, rather than, hey, I can lead you out to something better, and you got to trust me. But let's go. Let's take up our bed and walk. Let's get out.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and the hooks. I really like that image. Actually, the cycles produced by those patterns of thought are anti-life. They're going in the wrong direction. And so, and actually that connects very well to what you were saying about something higher is calling to us. I mean, it's fascinating, just right down to the letter of the story, that the country, the culture, the context that Abram is existing in is idolatrous.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I also think about that. How much of this is about all the false gods? I mean, there's this simple, beautiful definition of false god in our tradition, which has to do with anything that we're giving an inordinate degree of attention to and focus is actually something of a god to us. And so I can hear that and go, oh, all right. Another way it was put, and actually we reflected on this when we did our own version of Purpose-Driven Life years ago, is he said, the greatest expression of love is how you choose to spend your time. So, okay, how am I spending my time? And what does that say about the loves I'm cultivating, the thing that I'm focused on? So he's being called to consider that maybe the gods that have garnered so much of his attention aren't the Lord of his heart and may not be leading him to the greatest possible happiness. And I think that's often where we are when we're first feeling like, I wonder if I'm being nudged somewhere new, is we feel the whole of chasing all these other false gods and having them not result in happiness and fulfillment. And so was it St. John the Divine that talked about holy discontent? But there's like a discontent of the soul chasing after those things that haven't been life-giving, that propels us. And I think that's the Lord, to seek after something higher.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Thanks for bringing the idolatry thing, because that's such a great, to me, a reflective point. If anyone listening and watching today is I'm thinking about this for myself, and maybe others will too, is like, what are the things that I can look at within myself that are those things that I'm feeding that I don't want to be feeding, that are not life-giving, that are distractions, is another word I'll use, distraction from my higher purpose. And how can I be led from them? And going back to that point made earlier about the old self has to die before the new one can be conceived, is that there is a letting go of some things that we do care about. And talk about people who struggle with addiction of a certain kind. You can look at it from a very rational place and say, yes, I know that this is hurting me. I know this is not okay, but I can't walk away from it because there's something comfortable about the dysfunction. Is you look at it from the outside and say, how can that be better than the alternative? It's like, well, I'm familiar with it. I know this. The devil I know is better than the devil I don't know, that idea. And so to have the trust to know that if I can have the courage to take the steps I need to take to walk away from this, to go on this different journey, that the Lord will be there and that the Lord will carry me and take me to the promised land eventually. And it's going to be a struggle. I know that old self has to die, and that will hurt. That'll be a hard thing, right? Where do we want to go? And one of the things I like to point out to people too, and to myself hopefully too, is that the Lord regards our aim, where we're trying to go. A lot of people regret the past, which is understandable, or say, you don't know what I've done. And the Lord doesn't care about where you've been. The Lord cares about where you're going. And I love this. This passage from Secrets of Heaven 13:17 says, the Lord regards nothing else in us but our aim or purpose. And it goes on to talk about that a bit more, but it's like, that's what the Lord cares about. Where are you trying to go? And yeah, we'll stumble and fall and backtrack along the way, but where am I headed? Where's in my heart do I want to be? And I think the Lord works with us with that and is really interested in that part of ourselves. Again, I can let go of the past. It doesn't matter anymore. Where am I going?
I love that. Yeah, God doesn't look at our past history, but regards our present heart. And I think if you look at the message of, if you look at the life and teaching of Jesus throughout the whole of the New Testament, he was basically over and over again, not only getting people to interrogate the way they were thinking about things, but then flipping their conventional understanding. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you, and on the other side of the I say to you, it's about where your heart is.
Yeah.
Right. Over and over again from all these different vantage points. I think that's the other thing, is a lot of what we spend our life working on masquerades as purposeful. We're busy and we're doing stuff, but where are we in regards to that which really matters, that deeper level? And are we willing to look at that and think about that and work on that with the Lord's help? Yeah.
Yeah, the busy thing. When we're busy, we tend to not look around as that the other people that we could be loving and caring about. That's the downside of the busy thing. But I don't think we're not called to be busy. We're called to love one another as the Lord has loved us. Something you said a little earlier made me think of the scripture that says, lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust corrupt, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust corrupt, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Talked about that. Where is your heart? Like, what do I treasure? What do I value? And what am I striving for? Or am I in the hamster wheel of possession and fame and recognition? Or am I on a journey that's leading to a mountaintop and holding the hands of others along the way instead of, bolting for the top of the mountain to be there first? Like, look at me, I'm the first one to the top of the mountain. Well, did you turn around and see if there's anyone else that needed some help along the way, or did you take in any of the beauty along the way?
We are not created for the sake of ourselves, but for the sake of others, right? And we were having a discussion before we started this recording. Maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I'm going to. I know that in my life and in my family, we have dealt a tremendous amount with anxiety and worry and fast forwarding or rewinding past the tough stuff because it's hard to process that way. And it strikes me in the course of this conversation, because we were saying, yeah, what do you do about that? And then we started recording. And this is what you do about that. This is what keeps you in the present moment.
Hmm.
There's a Celtic prayer that says, God in my sleeping, God in my rising, God in my seeking, God in my seeing, God in my heart. And you just have this, when you are when you're willing to be led, there's this beautiful teaching that for the angels, and in our theology, angels are just people, people who went through the world, chose this higher way, and now are in the other world, being our cheerleaders, encouraging us, supporting us in doing the same thing. But it says that for the angels, the past and the future are together in the present moment. And then it gives this beautiful statement as to why. Because they trust that the Lord is taking care of everything. That's what allows them to be in the present moment.
Yeah.
So it sounds abstract until you start considering what the course of this conversation really is, which is these little nudges you get every day, thousands of little nudges to notice, to begin to be attentive to start to want to care about, and then to actually care for these little things that are beyond yourself and your own context. These are the things that over time free us from anxiety and worry and help us to trust that the Lord really is taking care of everything. Because when we reach out and we seek and we get in touch with those things, what we're getting in touch with is love.
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. As you're talking, I was thinking about Abraham, where Abram doesn't ask any questions of the Lord, like, wait, hold on a sec. This is
Wait,
going to take,
bring that back.
yeah, this is going to take care of my stuff if I go on this trip. And when are we going to get there? And what's it going to be like? I don't know if that's, intentional, that it's not, that's not in the text like that, but it's interesting when we think about our own reaction to anything like, well, am I just going to ask all the doubting questions, or am I going to go, okay, well, the Lord he's asking me to do something. He's with me. So I guess I will trust that is so, and take the step. But man, it's there's something in us that does not like that. We want to know exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. Otherwise, we're like, I'm not so sure,
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes the greatest joys in our life come from when we can just let go and trust that what happens next will be okay. And I don't know all the answers, but I feel like this is the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it, trusting that the Lord is guiding us. I hear this too from people that struggle with a difficult situation, or maybe going through a divorce or something, and just want to know when the pain will stop or when it will get better. It's like, well, I don't have a date for that. I can't tell you the when, but I can tell you it will at some point. But we want to know the when. I think we don't get to know the when. I think we get to know that it will.
Yeah, times, and half a time when conditions are right.
Right.
And I think we might have mentioned this a couple episodes ago, but it reminded me of that beautiful teaching that conjecture about the future or regret about the past takes away all joy.
Yeah.
So back to that. There's a life for me on the other side of this. It's not the same life, but it's a life. So I'm going to take the next steps into that life that I know is there for me and try to surrender the timetable.
It is. Yeah. One more thing I thought about with this story. I don't know where we want to cut for the end of the story today, but
We've talked about a lot of beautiful things, so I don't necessarily feel like we can divide this into several conversations, but this morning's has really been a blessing. So anyway.
well, one final note on that is just that it says Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their possessions that they had gathered and the people they had acquired and departed. The Lord actually takes everything that we have learned and acquired in our journey with us, like all the things we know. He doesn't ask us to jettison everything that we know to be true, or that our belief system. He's going to slowly bend us and work with us and guide us. I don't know, it makes me think, hey, that's a bit comforting in some ways to feel like, well, I do get to bring along who I am. This isn't about not being me. We talked today a little bit earlier about this before we were recording, about the Lord works with the vessel of our individuality as he created us. And that's a blessing to be celebrated. It's not like, well, I want to be like Ethan, or I want to be like somebody else. Like, no, just be the beautiful vessel the Lord created you to be.
Amen.
He will work with you and lead you, and you will be a blessing. Yeah, just wanted to touch on that.
the term for blessing in the biblical Hebrew, or the primary one anyway, and by the way, I always feel like inserting these caveats when I make a linguistic point. I'm not a linguist, but my understanding of it is that the term for blessing is barak, the primary one, and that the connotation is something higher flowing to what is lower. And so I also am sort of thinking about, as he's being told that he will be blessed and be able to be a blessing, that's because what is higher from the Lord is able to flow into and touch his life all the way out to those outermost things. That's what makes our life capable of being a blessing.
Thank you. All right. Is it a wrap for today?
I think so. Any takeaways for you, Dave, for the week?
Well, I really appreciate the conversation. I feel like this story feels more beautiful today than it did yesterday for me. And I just like the takeaway of that the Lord is continually calling us to blessings, not because he thinks we're horrible the way we are, but because he knows that we can receive more of those blessings from above if we can trust that he's leading us and we'll follow. So that's what I got. What you got?
I think that really speaks to me, that last part. Lord, give me an open, soft, humble, teachable, leadable heart, so that I can receive a blessing and be a blessing. And blessings to all of you, and love and peace.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being with us.